Hello everyone, I am Amit Sonchhatra from PGP 2018-20. I am Trichy. Today I am going to talk about autonomy of RBI and its impact on Indian economy. There are four things that we will be discussing today. First, what do we mean by autonomy of RBI? Why is it important? What is the current scenario and the way forward for RBI and government? First, why autonomy is important. In theory, RBI is currently a self-governing institute which fixes its targets and works under its rules without external control of government. So far, central government can only suggest RBI, but RBI has the freedom to implement their suggestions. However, in practice, unlike the US Federal Reserve, the architects of our central bank did not intend to give RBI the autonomy that it craves for. Remember, the RBI Act of 1934 has its origin in British era. In fact, the word autonomy doesn't exist in the RBI Act. The word independent is in the context of nation's independence, not in the context of RBI's functioning and governance. At independence, India made the brave choice of borrowing democracy from the West, but also made a grave mistake of adopting the colonial institutions from the British. As a result, every national institution remains highly tethered to the equivalent of the crown, that is the government of India, exposing them to use and misuse at the whims and fancies of the government. Also, during Indira Gandhi's regime until economic reforms of 1991, India was to keep regulatory power and control within bodies controlled by directly central government in ministries, or if a separate organization existed, to exert control or influence by appointing bureaucrats and formal bureaucrats to head it. The RBI was often headed by senior officers of IAS, the bureaucrats elite of India. Newer independent regulators created after economic reforms were also often led by IAS officers. This model suffers from two problems specifically. First, susceptibility to influence through prior social and professional networks, and second, lack of sufficiently deep domain expertise. Hence, it was important to have academic economists to head central banks. However, till now, RBI has been headed by economists and IAS bureaucrats alternatively. The autonomy is compromised in either of the way. Next, we come to why is it really important to have an autonomous governing body like RBI. First is macroeconomic stability. Growth is good, but growth with macroeconomic stability is even better, especially in a country where so many people live at the margin. For the RBI, it means ensuring growth does not exceed our potential, adopting prudential policies that reduce our risk, and building sufficient buffers that the country is protected against shocks. This responsibility of macroeconomic stability lies on the shoulder of RBI, hence it's important for RBI to work autonomously. Second, open market operations. Also in past, RBI used direct instruments such as interest rate, CRR, SLR, etc. However, in late 1990s, especially in 1998, RBI's approach to inflation, distressed debt, financial inclusion, banking sector reform, and market reform has been completely revamped. With the introduction of more market-driven approaches, the autonomy of RBI has gained its importance. The centerpiece in the operating framework of monetary policy became the LAF, that is Liquidity Adjustment Facility. Indirect open market operations like repo and reverse repo rates essentially begin to provide a corridor for market interest rates to evolve. This defined the money market operations like LF and CBLO, that's collateralized borrowing and lending operations. Hence, this paradigm shift to market-driven economic reforms needs autonomous RBI body to execute and also govern these plans efficiently. The government or the bureaucrats may not be in a position to understand the way an economist or an RBI governor looks at the economy. Third and important thing is complementary functions. Also in his book, I Do What I Do, Dr. Rajan explains that RBI cannot just exist in backend accommodating always expansionary fiscal policies. However, its ability to say no has to be protected. At the same time, the central bank cannot become free of all the constraints it has to work under a framework set by government. This requires a number of actions, and these actions can't be in hierarchical nature. Rather, both of them have to enjoy independence as well as interdependence in their own capacity. This is the fundamental benefit of a floating currency as well, that both the fiscal and monetary policy has its own levers to balance out growth and inflation. If the RBI is pressurized to accommodate the fiscal expansion every time, then the inflationary growth is inevitable. Now let's look at what is the current status of autonomy at RBI. The most serious and unprecedented violation of this was the demonetization. Former RBI Governor Dr. Rajan also acknowledged the fact that neither him nor the RBI under him wanted to go for the demonetization in the way it was planned and executed. Second, resignation. The resignation of Dr. Rujit Patel in lieu of political pressure also questions the autonomy that RBI should command. The Section 7 of RBI Act, which empowers the government to direct the RBI to act on issues that is considered necessary in public interest, is the starting point that restricts the autonomy of RBI. The third and recent interest cut rate by RBI also shows one of this feature. On February 7, 2019, RBI reduced interest rates by 25 basis points to bring down repo rate, reverse repo rate, marginal standing facility and bank rate by 6.25 and 6.5% respectively under liquidity adjustment facility. Note that this was introduced a month after the resignation of the former RBI Governor, Dr. Rujit Patel. So the question at hand is, the central bank is curtailing rate of interest just because of falling economy for the last 3 quarters, or is it the outcome of the political business cycle which will help government to maintain pro-growth stand? One of the most obvious reasons for lowering the rate can be said to the political business cycle highlighted by the upcoming general elections in 2019. Political business cycle is basically the interaction between the economic policy decisions and political considerations. This is a temporary relief for policymakers, but if fiscal expansion is not intervened for long run, inflation rate will drastically increase as efforts are made to lower employment. This is exactly what Philip Cous teaches us. In long run, the prices will rise by means of automatic transmission mechanism, leaving country with high inflation situation. Hence, the policies implemented during election phase usually have short run effect which can be equivocal sometimes. Next, lowering interest rate may not always stimulate the intent and liquidity before the election results are out, because banks may also be hesitant to lend money looking for some lucrative investments. The effectiveness of expansionary policy is usually measured by measuring index, which is the sum of inflation and unemployment. Hence, for policymakers, it's a trade-off, either to raise inflation or go for the unemployment. Given that India's inflation is well below the target rate of 4%, RBI current step will definitely help government to win votes by pulling down unemployment lever in short term. But as a side effect, economy may also fall in trap of high inflation because current CPI and WPI, the consumer price index, and the wholesale price index are on upward trend. In fact, fiscal deficit will also add to the inflationary tension in the long term. In summary, we can say that the tone of RBI expansionary policy is more of accommodating the government's pro-growth stand rather than its own autonomous decision. Having said that, there are 4 fundamental alternatives left for RBI to move forward. First, objective framework for policy evaluation, strengthening the oversight, increased functional autonomy, and governor appointment. We will discuss each of them in detail. First, when the responsibility of the RBI are fuzzy, its actions can continuously be questioned. Instead, if the constitutional authorities outline a framework for the responsibility for the RBI, it can take actions consistent with those responsibilities and be held to the outcomes. The inflation objectives recently set for the RBI by the government are an example of what is exactly needed. Criticism and appraisal, both of them should be backed up by some sort of objectivity. Similarly, the RBI board has adopted a risk management framework which indicates the level of equity that RBI needs to maintain given the risk it faces. The dividend policy of RBI then becomes a technical matter of how much residual surplus is available each year after bolstering equity. Frameworks thus reduce the space for differences between central, state, and RBI. The RBI's role in macroeconomic stability is, however, still fuzzy. When RBI clearly has a responsibility for the safety and soundness of the credit institutions and the stability of the external account, there are some areas that are still hazier. For example, with an inflation-focused framework, the RBI's ability to be accommodative depends on the fiscal prudence from the center and states. How much should the RBI warn on fiscal deficits, including the building up of contingent liabilities, and when should such warning be seen as interfering in the legitimate decisions of the elected representative of the people? These are all the grey areas that still needs some of the clarification. Some other recommendation for the RBI and the governance for the good governance are: first, governor appointment. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the appointment of the government from an academic economist pool is more important rather than just appointing from the IIS pool. It should be noted that major economic reforms in India were brought out by economists, not by IIS. This includes I.G. Patel, Bimal Jalan, Manmohan Singh, Raghuram Rajan, and the recent former governor, Mr. Ujit Patel. The third reform that RBI needs to implement is strengthening its oversight. The freedom the RBI has to take operational decisions such as the foreign currency non-resident bank FCNRB swap arrangement, invariably in consultation with the finance ministry, is important. However, there are always government entities that are seeking oversight over various aspects of the RBI activities. Multiple layers of scrutiny, especially by entities that do not have the technical understanding, will always hamper the activities that RBI takes into decision making. Fourth thing, increased functional autonomy. The autonomy of RBI has to be protected. RBI has to given the right to say no to any of the fiscal expansionary policies that RBI seeks or the government seems to be the more of the inflationary growth perspective. Not just for the sake of the RBI Act, but for the better control of the economy and avoiding inflationary pressures, RBI autonomy has to be maintained. This includes scope of RBI's of authority need to be examined and reaffirmed in a way that they can take actions independently.